Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Ich warte seit Wochen auf diesen Tag und tanz vor Freude über den Asphalt. Als wär's ein Rhythmus, als gäb's ein Lied, das mich immer weiter durch die Straßen zieht. Komm dir entgegen.
Hello and welcome to Gegenpressing, the Bundesliga podcast. I'm Manu and Stefan. He's Stefan Bienkowski. We are back. It's match day 4. Stefan, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm going very well, thanks. Lovely kind of eventful week to get back into the swing of things. Not only a really enticing Bundesliga Matchday, but also absolute carnage in the international scene as well. And I think that was perhaps best summed up when I tried to put together my fantasy team ahead of this weekend. For anyone who didn't notice, I took my holidays in the lead up to the transfer deadline day, and I have returned to domestic football. So not only did I miss transfer deadline day, but then obviously the international break came afterwards. So I've kind of returned to the Bundesliga, and I feel like I've been away for like 5 years because at least two of the players in my team are no longer even playing in German football. So you can imagine my kind of bewilderment when I had to make sense of that. That being Borna Sosa and Lindstrom from Frankfurt. So had to make some big changes there, but I was happy to do so because I was able to finally kind of squeeze Danny Olmo into my team and Robin Gosens. So hopefully they'll both have good weekends for me. Can't really be any worse than last match. So I think we were both lamenting and we both did pretty terribly.
Yeah.
And I think our listeners in the Gegenpressing League are really kind of running away with it and showing us who know what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm terrible at fantasy, which is underlined by my standings. I think I have to make some changes this upcoming weekend. Looking at making some transfers. I have 3. I might use all 3 because I'm just not happy with how this is working out. Stefan, I do have Olmo. I do have Gosens. Maybe this weekend will be better because they're not playing one another. So maybe I should leave those 2 in there. I do feel confident about Sané and Kane, who I have up front, and Openda as well. So I think I'm happy with that. But I have 2 Wolfsburg guys in my midfield, and I think I need to change that.
Yeah, my team is very Leipzig heavy, which I'm kind of okay with at the moment. But yeah, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But I think, it's tricky. It's hard to tell. I mean, as we'll probably find out on this as we go through these fixtures, it's really hard to bank on any specific team right now.
Yeah, I have Musiala on the bench, so I think he's going to return in my lineup. Although he's involved in a top spiel, which is always really tricky. I don't know. We'll see. This is like something that I always scratch my head over every week, and I seem to be just getting fundamentally wrong. We had Sepp on last week, and he laughed at me because I said to him that I made transfers every week leading up to the match day, and he just said, if you are that unsure, that maybe that's just not it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens, I guess. But it's been a tricky start for us, but we promised we'd do this on the show every week, so I guess that'll keep us honest, that'll keep us on top of things, and then we might learn a thing or two.
Yeah. I'm a very tricky, happy sporting director, Stefan. I react rather than sitting it out. I don't know what that tells me about my personality, and if you as a listener, I don't know who I compare to. If you as a listener listen to this and you think I sound like a sporting director that you remember, then shoot me a comment. I can take it. Anyways, we have lots to discuss, so let's jump into it right after this break. Football is back, and I mean American football, And BetOnline is your number one information source for all your sports wagering info with all the up-to-minute stats, news scores, and matchup breakdowns. Get the latest game odds, spreads, and totals from the NFL and college football at your fingertips with BetOnline's real-time update and statistics, news, and odds. From week 1 all the way to college football playoff and the Super Bowl, BetOnline gives you access to the best football promotions and contests available anywhere online. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that is BLEAV, BELIEVE, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online where the game starts. Stefan, speaking of this ad, are you an American football guy?
No.
No, me neither. I've strangely gotten into baseball this summer. Simply because you can put it on in the background and it just kind of relaxes you. It's like a beautiful background noise. You know what I mean? But football is too violent and not loud for me, I've determined. And since I'm already following hockey, I think I can only do with one contact sport in my life.
Yeah, I used to like American football when I was younger. I used to kind of stay up and watch the Super Bowl if I could be bothered. Played Madden a few times, but yeah, it's not something I'm hugely interested in. Yeah, football. I can't even really keep on top of rugby, which is kind of the second sport in the UK. So I go football, and then after that, I just go off into my little hobbies, which at the moment seem to revolve around video games. So yeah, no extra sports for me.
Fair enough. Absolutely fair enough. Yeah, I go to about 2 or 3 American football games a year because my buddy in Seattle has season tickets for the Seahawks. That is probably the times I watch the game, and then the Super Bowl. That's about it. And I live in the right time zone. I don't even know how people do it that live in Europe, but
yeah, I can only commend them.
It's just too long. And you need to stay on top of it. With baseball, is long too, but you don't need to stay on top of it. So, that's it.
I have been to a baseball game, actually, but I remember very little about the actual baseball. I was in a box, so I just watched television the entire time, stuffed my face with food and drinks, and then I don't think...
Yeah, you summed up baseball really well right there.
Well, yeah, there we go, yeah. I remember discussing with some English colleagues when I was living in Germany about the merits of cricket, which, as a Scotsman, I think are few and far between, until they pointed out to me that the entire point of cricket is to go there and get drunk.
That's baseball.
Or to basically sit there in the sun and have a nice day, at which point I thought, well, do you know what? Maybe I can get behind this.
Yeah, that's essentially baseball. You summed it up. It's a great day out in the park with great food options, and oh look, there's also sport. Anyways, speaking of sport, we have a big match, right? And I think this is your match of the week, right? The Bayern versus Leverkusen match. I think this is everyone's match of the week. So we kind of just divvied it up, and one of us gets the task to do one, and then the other one gets to do the Dortmund game. And I think you picked this one, Bayern against Leverkusen. We did break it down in great depth on the bonus show, so look out for more content there. But what are you thinking here, Stefan?
Yeah, it's hard to kind of say any more on this, since we did spend a good 30 or 40 minutes talking about it yesterday. But to maybe kind of sum it up, I think it's going to be a fascinating match. I think obviously Bayern are coming up against probably the most in form or most impressive team in Germany right now. However, having said that, the way that Leverkusen play, especially this season under Alonso, is a very high line, very possession-based, very dominant team. And the entire system really does revolve around keeping the ball, playing a lot of passes, playing high up the pitch, and breaking teams down. And I'm really intrigued to see how that translates to playing Bayern Munich at the Allianz Arena, which just about any team in Europe would struggle to impose themselves on. So I think it's going to be a huge test for Leverkusen. I think they do have obviously they have the players, but I think they also maybe have the, how do you put it? They might have the advantage in certain areas of the pitch. I think it's worth. I should point out just here, by the way, I did say on the bonus show that I took the reports of Kimmich being out of this game with a pinch of salt, and lo and behold, it looks like he will be back for this game, which I said on the show.
Also, I'm taking that with a pinch of salt too.
Yeah, it was always the case. Every single international break, Bayern players are suddenly struck down with these mysterious injuries and ailments, only to recover in time, so they can get a good week off. It's always a bizarre coincidence. God only knows what's going on there. But anyway, yeah. So it looks like Kimmich will be back for this game. However, even with him in place, I do still think Bayern do have that soft underbelly in the middle of the park, and that's obviously where Florian Wirtz likes to play. So they're going to have to keep an eye on him. I think I kind of said as well, there's something that might play in Leverkusen's favour is the fact that in Frimpong and Hoffmann, they more or less have two wing-backs on the same wing who really could double up on Alphonso Davies and limit Bayern's attack in that regard. So I think it's going to be a really fascinating game. I think there'll be goals. And I've kind of capitulated, and unfortunately, so and I've gone for a 2-2 draw for this game.
That's hilarious. That's my prediction. I went for a 2-2 draw too. Yeah, I am actually I'm actually the opposite of you, Stefan. I'm taking the Kimmich could return with a pinch of salt the other direction as well, because this could also be just Bayern saying he's ready, and I wouldn't be surprised if he still starts on the bench. You know what I mean? You know, because like we don't know, and I think don't know if Per Kimmich could afford politically to sit out the France game, right? So yeah, although if he did, and considering the way Germany played without him, I don't know what that says about his future with the national team, which is of course irrelevant for the show because this is about the Bayern and the Bayern Leverkusen fixture. And I underline a lot of the things that you say. I think this is a massive test for Leverkusen, and I think that on the day, the way these two teams line up, they will cancel each other out. But I think they're both also, Bayern maybe more so than Leverkusen, are vulnerable to concede, and which is why, you know, this 2-2 draw makes a ton of sense to me. But I think, you know, if you want more in-depth analysis on this, go and listen to the bonus show. It's on the Substack. I think it's really worth a listen. I think 35 minutes, right, Stefan? Yeah. 35 minutes of full analysis. Check it out. Okay, so that brings us into the Saturday games. The first one is Leipzig against Augsburg. Dani Olmo picked up an injury. This is the circle of life, Stefan. He goes to the national team, gets hurt, is out, plays well, goes to the national team, gets hurt, goes out. Unfortunately, he's out. It looks like he might be out for this one. I have to wait and see. But I do think that Leipzig have too much for this Augsburg team, and I actually went for a very convincing 4-1 victory for Leipzig here.
Yeah, I've gone for, even though I've got Dani Olmo on my team, I'm going to have to stick on my bench now because I didn't realise he was out until we started doing these previews. But yeah, I've got to go for the same one. I actually think this is probably one of the few fixtures that of the weekend that was a bit easier to predict. You know, Leipzig obviously pretty decent start to the season. They're scoring goals for fun. I think it is worth noting that Dani Olmo has really been the kind of protagonist throughout that. He has kind of been the guy who's kind of lit a fire in this Leipzig team, but you would think they should have enough kind of firepower between them, particularly Xabi Simons, who's had a really great start to life in Germany. So yeah, I've gone for a 2-0 win, and yeah, I think this one's probably one of the easier ones to predict.
The easiest, I would actually say. Fabio Cavallo might get a start for Olmo. So we'll see, right? So if you have him in your fantasy team, maybe this is the time to unleash him. I have Olmo in my fantasy team too. Have to take him out and see what I will do there. Anyways, up next, Freiburg Dortmund. This is my game of the week. I am still very concerned about Borussia Dortmund, even though I thought Emre Can had one of his best games in a long time against France. If he can take that and bring it back to his club team. I think that's going to help them enormously. But then at the same time, Schlotterbeck, pretty much, terrible game against Japan. Didn't play against France. Süle was okay, of course. But you hear stuff from Dortmund that, there's now behind closed door meetings. There's all this controversy whether Edin Terzic is the right man still going forward. There was already discussions about a potential coaching change, and I went for a 2-2 draw here, Stefan. I just don't know. Dortmund continue to baffle me, and I think they're the sick man of the Bundesliga at the moment.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that, to be honest with you. However, this is a really tricky one, I think, because everything, my head certainly says this is a game that Freiburg should be looking to win. They've got a great home record. They've actually lost 2 of the last 17 home games in the Bundesliga. They've kind of had a hot and cold start to the season, but it seems as though Christian Streich kind of got things more or less settled down at Freiburg. The only thing that kind of stands against that for me is their actual record against Dortmund's pretty poor. They lost 3-1 last season and 5-1, and if you actually go back through their kind of records, their head-to-head, Dortmund have only lost 5 of the last 46 games against Freiburg. So, there's something of I don't know what the opposite of a bogey team is, but, there's just something about Freiburg that Dortmund always seem to have the number. And I do wonder if after an international break in which Terzic has probably had plenty of time to look over things, some players have been able to kind of rest and kind of come back. And, they've certainly had to kind of come to terms with a really poor start to the season. You would certainly be expecting some sort of fight back from Dortmund. If it's another really tepid performance, if it's another close performance, then I think you're right. I think the calls for Terzic to go will only grow. And you could certainly argue after a week and a half off with a decent chunk of his squad, if he's still unable to kind of turn things around, you have to kind of wonder what's going on there. But I think it's going to be a really tight game. I think there's every chance that Freiburg could take points from them, but I've gone for a very narrow 1-0 win for Dortmund.
Optimist, thinking that they won't concede here.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's just something about this fixture. I think all kind of form goes out the window.
Fair enough. We'll see. All right, up next, Wolfsburg against Union Berlin. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, I think this is going to be another kind of very tight game, to be perfectly honest with you. Union haven't had the kind of perfect start to the season. Wolfsburg similarly haven't had a great start, but both teams have just kind of been picking up decent results here and there, and I've ended up kind of going for a 1-1 draw in this match just because I think both teams have looked decent, but neither have looked really comprehensive. I don't think either team really looks like they're kind of playing to their absolute best right now. I've also got Patrick Wimmer, my team, my fancy teams. I'm kind of hoping that he'll do something. But yeah, I don't know. What do you make of this game? I think 1-1 draw, but could go either way.
I actually thought Union started quite well with the first 2 games, right? They're deadly efficient. And then against Leipzig, they really fell apart. For some odd reason, people think Kevin Volland didn't deserve that red card. I think it was the easiest red card in the history of all red cards, but that's just me. And they really fell apart after that red card against a really strong Leipzig side, which is fair enough. Leipzig will probably do that to everyone who shows a little bit of weakness. So I actually went for a narrow Union Berlin victory here, 2-1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's perfectly logical. But I think the other thing as well that I was bearing in mind when I was doing this prediction is they've also got Real Madrid coming up in the Champions League, and you do wonder how much that is going to kind of be playing on their minds going into this game. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
I'm curious to see if Bonucci is going to get a start here.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll have to see what happens, won't we? It'll be interesting. It'll be crazy to see him in the Champions League as well for Union.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to see him for Union, period. It's just wild, really wild. All right, up next is Mainz against Stuttgart. I believe in the Stuttgart side, Stefan. I think Sebastian Hoeneß is really onto something here. His team has been scoring goals and conceding goals for fun. It's either 5 for them or 5 against them, I guess. But I think they're going to slightly break the trend here. I think they're still going to win, but not by 5 goals. That's a bit much. But I think they're going to convincingly beat Mainz 3-0.
Yeah. I must admit, I'm beginning to kind of worry for Mainz.
Me too.
You know, a 4-1 defeat to Union at the start of opening days, fair enough. But then a 1-1 draw against a pretty lowly Frankfurt side, and then a 4-0 defeat to Werder Bremen. You know, I know Bo Svensson was kind of speaking in earlier in the week and kind of saying how shocked he's been with the performances today. It feels as though his time at Mainz has been such a roller coaster in the sense that everything's either going really well or the wheels have come off and everything's falling apart. It definitely feels like they're kind of in the latter right now, and I completely agree with you. I think Stuttgart, when they come up against really good teams, can get pulled apart, but they obviously have enough firepower to kind of beat lowly sides. And you would think that they'd be looking at this game thinking this is 3 points that they really should be picking up. So yeah, I've gone for a 3-1 win for Stuttgart.
Guirassy could be a really good fantasy player pickup.
Yeah,
He's
absolutely.
Excellent. Really good player. Okay, Köln against Hoffenheim. What do you think here?
This was a tricky one. I think, obviously, I think the international break was a good time for Cologne. They didn't have the best start to the season. And I think, if I'm not mistaken as well, the home form in particular hasn't been great. I think, I was just looking at my notes there. They've only won one of the last 8 home games against any team, really. So I think they go into this game kind of concerned maybe with their own form, maybe a little low on confidence. And they're up against a Hoffenheim team who, obviously lost their opening game against Freiburg, but have then kind of picked up 2 decent wins against Heidenheim and Wolfsburg. And if I'm also not mistaken, I think I read somewhere, if I'm not mistaken, that the only player who's actually created more goal-scoring chances in the Bundesliga this season than Kramaric is actually Florian Wirtz. So,
wow.
Yeah, so there's a stat for you if you're looking for a midfielder in your fantasy team. So yeah, I don't know. I think Hoffenheim are kind of slowly but surely kind of working up the gears and kind of picking up some pace here under their manager. And I think they're probably good for the win here. So yeah, I'm going for a 2-1 win for Hoffenheim.
Yeah, I was very much on the fence here, so I just stayed on the fence and went for a 1-1 draw. I just couldn't pull this team apart. Kramaric, a statistic, that's interesting. If he is he considered a midfielder in fantasy Bundesliga? I need a midfielder. I might have to look into this one. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sold on either one of these teams yet, but I really have a hard time picking them apart, which is ultimately why I went for this 1-1 draw. And yeah, we'll see. Next is the what they categorize as the Spitzenspiel. I'm not sure whether this is actually a Spitzenspiel, Stefan. That's Bochum against Frankfurt. I don't know how the Bundesliga gods decided that this is going to be the one that they're going to advertise on a Saturday night, but I didn't make the match day. I didn't make the Spielplan. Someone else did that. But I have a very funny feeling about this game, and Bochum at home are a different beast, and I think this Frankfurt side is still kind of figuring it out. Signs of life, okay, of course, at the last match day, right? Despite all the chaos that surrounded them, but Bochum have beaten Bayern, Dortmund, and some other big sides at home, and I think they're going to do it here too. I think they're going to beat Frankfurt 2-1, Stefan.
Yeah, this was a tricky one. I think you've kind of got 2 teams in very different situations. You've got a Bochum side who've perhaps been better than performances have suggested. They had that very big, shocking 5-0 defeat to Stuttgart on the opening day. They then played Dortmund, where they more or less played them off the park and probably should have won that game, but had to
in Bochum.
But had to kind of put up with a point, and then obviously a hard-fought draw against Augsburg. So they've only got 2 points on the table right now. You then flip that to Frankfurt, who've got 5 points on the table, are undefeated. But, you bear in mind that the first game was against Darmstadt, then they played Mainz, who we just talked about. They've been very poor this season. And then they managed to kind of get a 1-1 draw with Cologne, who, again, as we mentioned, far from their best at the moment. And I do kind of feel like, the results might be kind of flattering this Frankfurt side at the moment. I think you're right. I think there obviously is life after the amount of players they've sold on, and I don't think any head coach would envy the job that has to be done now at Frankfurt after such a huge turnover of players. But yeah, you'd think if Bochum really had any ambition this season, they'd be going into this game thinking we can definitely match this Frankfurt side. We should be kind of taking what we can from them. And that's why I've gone with a 1-0 win for Bochum.
Yeah, I think we are pretty much in agreement. Just the result is slightly different. All right. Next up, Heidenheim against Bremen. What are you thinking here, Stefan?
So, obviously, Heidenheim hadn't had a bad start to the season. I think obviously they were the ones who kind of stole all the headlines before the international break with that result against Dortmund. And I was kind of looking at Werder Bremen, and I think even though they've only picked up one result or one win in the Bundesliga so far, I think if you kind of look through their fixtures, they had Bayern Munich in the opening match day, which was, I think 4-0 probably flatters Bayern in that game, to be honest with you. It was more of a game of two halves, in my opinion. I thought Bremen were actually okay for a large chunk of it. A very narrow 1-0 defeat to a good Freiburg side, and then I think in that third match day against Mainz is when we really saw the Werder Bremen that I'm kind of expecting this season. A team who can score a lot of goals and a team that'll be aiming for kind of mid-table. And I think they go into this game against Heidenheim kind of knowing that if they are going to kind of keep relegation at arm's length this season, these are the kind of games that they have to win. So I've gone for a 2-1 win for Bremen just because I think... And I think it'll be a tight game, but I think we'll probably see Bremen finally kind of continue that goal-scoring form into this game. And yeah, I think they more or less have enough talent to beat them, even if Niklas Füllkrug now sits on the bench at Dortmund.
Which is funny. I always went for a 2-1 Bremen win here. So we're in agreement again. Yeah, I think this is going to be a difficult game for Bremen at Heidenheim, right? At the Voigt Arena. I think this is going to be a place where a lot of teams will have difficulties. I think Frank Schmidt is actually probably one of the best coaches in German football, period. Just don't tell the DFB that, because if they figure that out, they might put him on the list. But I just think that, most of the time Heidenheim are going to walk away as the loser this year. It's simply the nature of what they are as a team. And I think that Bremen just have enough to get all 3 points here. But this is going to be tight. I think it's going to be very tight. I think it's going to actually be an interesting Sunday game to watch. As I think will be this next one, which is the final one, Darmstadt against Gladbach. I was tempted here because we all know what happens to Gladbach when they play well against Bayern Munich, right? The curse is real. Although I think that I saw enough of Gladbach here that make me think that they will actually be okay this year. Seoane is a good coach. I think that they have done quite well this transfer window, bringing in the right players. I don't think they're as good as they were with Thuram and Hoffmann, right? Not yet anyways, but I think they're certainly good enough to beat Darmstadt, although I do think that this one is also going to be tight, Stefan, so I went for another 2-1 win for Gladbach.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone for the exact same thing. I've gone for a 2-1 win for Gladbach, but I think it's going to be a really tight game. I think we're looking at a Gladbach team here who are still by no means comfortable with themselves, comfortable maybe with their new head coach. They've conceded a stunning amount of goals already this season. I think it's 9 in the first 3 games, if I'm not mistaken. 9. And they've actually conceded more shots than any other team in the league so far. Now, a large chunk of that's because they played Bayern Munich and Bayer Leverkusen, who, as we said at the top of the show, probably the two best teams in Germany right now. So thorough spankings off both of those teams isn't really the end of the world for Gladbach. But that 4-4 draw with Augsburg at the start of the season really suggests to me that they're by no means a settled team. So I think this is the kind of game where they'll know they have to try and get something from it. So I think Darmstadt will score just for the nature in which this Gladbach defence looks all over the place at the moment. But yeah, I think on the balance of things, they should be able to pick up 3 points.
Yeah, it's an interesting match day. Lots of very balanced fixtures, except for one, which is Leipzig against Augsburg.
The only thing I would say I completely agree with you, but maybe to wrap up, I just, maybe I'm being a snob, but I'm looking at those Sunday fixtures thinking, this is the kind of thing that I feel like the DFB really has to pay more attention to. Like, no offense to Heidenheim, Darmstadt, Bremen, Gladbach, but we're talking about 4 teams in the lower half of the table, 4 teams with, okay, maybe Bremen, Gladbach do have some international appeal, but there's nothing about those fixtures that's really going to galvanise anyone who's not already. I mean, as we would say, they're games for the purists, aren't they? They're games for the Bundesliga fanatics who will watch any game that they can find on telly. But
yeah,
you know, it just feels like the Sunday games are constantly overlooked by the Bundesliga, and obviously it's a lot of pressure because, you know, fans want games at 3 p.m. or 3:30 on a Saturday, which is understandable. But I don't know. It just feels like, I feel like the Sunday fixtures are always an afterthought.
You know, when I was a kid, the Sunday fixture was often the big game because it was live on Sat.1 in a show called Ranissimo, and that was in the 90s. And, you know, one of the big fixtures that they would often show at that time slot was Bayern against Leverkusen.
Yeah,
because,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd be interested if we get some sort of explanation from the Bundesliga, but it feels like that Sunday night slot is such an obvious one to stick a good game on. But
I think the one issue that they have is that it's Champions League next week.
Yeah, of course.
So
of course.
they try to kind of front load, you know, the big teams, you know, the Bayern, Leverkusen, Leipzig, Dortmund, Berlin. Because these teams are all in action, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
But I'm with you. Put something else on that time slot. Like at a first glance, one that kind of sticks out to me would have been like Mainz Stuttgart, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stuttgart is a really interesting team at the moment. They play good football. Put them in that slot. You know,
yeah,
that's what I would have maybe done. But I'm not one of the CEOs, because there's 2 of them now of the DFL. I don't make these decisions.
At least
I
not
can give
yet.
them feedback. We have that line of communication, so maybe give that feedback next time we talk to them.
No, I think they're probably, if they are listening, they're probably screaming into their phones right now saying exactly what you said a moment ago. It's because of the Champions League, which admittedly I didn't think about, so I received my point. It's a fair point.
Yeah, it's tricky. I get it. Anyways, as always, the show is brought to you by BetOnline, and I should have mentioned it earlier. Sometimes I forget. I'm very sorry. Get German football news. Check that site out. They're really, really kind every week to put up our results, count the points, and, you know, promote this podcast. So thank you once again for that shout out. Make sure to set up your fantasy Bundesliga team. Don't listen to us because we don't know what we're doing. Trust your gut instead. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up, Stefan?
No, I think you put it perfectly.
Okay, good. We'll be back next week. Enjoy the match day. Until then, auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you for listening to Believe. You can show support to your host by subscribing to the show and giving us a 5-star rating on your preferred platform. Check us out at Believe.com and search for BLEAV on YouTube.